everyone, and welcome to another Fresh Fiction Video Book Club. I'm Samantha T, and today's guest is calling in all the way from the future, actually, over in Australia. We have best-selling, award-winning Amy Andrews, and I have so many different questions for you, Amy. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me. Bring on the questions. Bring on the questions. If you want to know the lotto numbers, I'm from the future, so I can probably get them to you as well.
Good to know. We'll save that for the happy hour after party so that we can have a controlled win there, okay?
I feel like I
Definitely.
probably should get some champagne, even though it is like 10 in the morning for happy hour. My husband was here, he'd get me a cocktail, but anyway.
Hey, we are never opposed to that, and no judgment. An early morning cocktail sounds fantastic to me. No problems.
Yeah. It's like, you put orange juice in it, it's just like breakfast, really, isn't it?
Exactly. It's healthy at that point. I mean, it's fruit. Like,
Exactly.
come on. Well, Amy, before we even jump into things, I do want to give a shout out to Kathy Maxwell because she's the one that connected us. She was down in
Yes.
Australia doing a tour and attending things, and I had reached out and said, "Hey, can you put in a good word?" And she's like, "Well, what about Amy Andrews? Have you read any of her books?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, yes, 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 yes."
I know she said to me, now, when you get home, make sure you email, the fresh fiction people. I'll get you their email address, and they're wanting to have people from Australia on. And I was like, oh yeah, sure, okay, no worries. So, here I am. So thank you to Kathy, she's amazing. Kathy Maxwell is such a scream, isn't she? We had such a great time when she was in Australia.
Oh yeah, she's always lots of fun, and I mean, I've been reading her books for years, and
Yeah.
she's been a real friend of ours, and comes to events, and that's where it was so exciting to be able to connect with you, because we haven't been able to see you at many events here in the States,
No.
and so the wonders of Zoom, right?
Yes, thank goodness Zoom. Who knew that was going to be a thing?
Well, Amy, let's jump into something easy initially. Tell us a little bit about yourself, other than that you're in Australia, and how did you first get started writing?
Right. So I wrote my first book when I was 22, so quite young. And I was living in the UK at the time. My husband and I after we got married, we moved to the UK for 2 years. We did a working holiday there. And I'm a nurse as well. I don't nurse anymore. And I was actually unemployed temporarily for a little while because we'd moved to a new place. And it was our first winter in the UK. And now where I come from in Australia is hot, and there's certainly no seasonal changes in the tropics. So when I say there were cobwebs frozen on our house, on the outside of our house, I was like, wow, cobwebs can freeze. Who knew? So it was very cold. And I was like, what can I do? Because I had some feelers out at different hospitals around. So what can I do while I'm waiting, to hear about jobs that does not involve me getting off this electric blanket on this bed? And I thought, oh, I'll write that book that's in my head. And really, until that point in time, it was a bit of a light bulb moment because I hadn't really thought that I had a book in my head until then. It was a very strange thing. And that's what I did. I wrote it in 10 days, 50,000 words in 10 days, 5,000 words a day. I wrote it longhand. This was back in the dark ages, 1991, where pretty much, well, maybe in America you all had personal computers, but nobody, nobody in Australia did, and certainly nobody in the UK did. So I wrote it out all long and had to pay somebody £100 to get it typed up and sort of send it off. So that's kind of, and like I sent it off to Mills and Boon. It was a Harlequin Mills and Boon. I'd read them all in my life. It was like I'd never thought of anything other than romance. That to me was, what that was my my sweet spot. And I sent it off. 9 months later, got a rejection, and that was a moment that I was like, okay, I will show you that I will write a book and you'll buy it if it kills me. So rejection made me bloody minded. And yeah, when I got back to Australia, I was like, okay, well, clearly I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm not going to, my first book didn't sell and become a, $1 million bestseller and be made into a movie, any of those things. So I need help. Where can I go? So then I kind of just set about, I joined Romance Writers Australia. I went to workshops and got how-to books and sort of had this thing that I call my apprenticeship that lasted for 12 years, during which I, worked full time and then, had little children and wrote and sort of fitting it all in around the edges. But 12 years after that rejection, I got a phone call from London to say they wanted to buy my book. So I have no idea now if I'm answering the question. I've gone off into a tangent. Was that what you were asking me?
It was
Oh,
exactly
good.
it. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, so that was published. It's been 20 years this month that since I got that phone call actually, and I've written 47 books I think for Harlequin, and 20, like another 40 odd books for different publishers as well. So it's been a 20-year career. It all started because I got rejected. So yeah.
Hey, there's nothing like, doing something out of spite, right? It's like,
Right,
I love it.
exactly.
I will show you.
It's the purest of motivations.
But then also, I mean, a 12-year span where you were learning your craft essentially. I mean, what do you think were some of the biggest takeaways from that, from writing that first book, going through all of those meetings and sessions before you were actually then published?
Yeah, I agree. It was like apprenticeship. It was learning my craft. And I mean, again, 1991, there was no there was no indie publishing. There was no, well, like there was pretty much no internet. I mean, there was, but like, didn't, I don't think we got an internet connection to like not in our house till like 1995. So, it was sort of, there wasn't any of that around that there is today. So there wasn't an alternative. Traditional publishing was the only kind of option open to you. And you learn a lot from writing, submitting, getting rejected, writing, submitting, getting rejected. That's a very informative process. And also spending all that time reading for reading analytically. So like reading books and going, well, oh, okay, well, that's that thing. People always say to me, what's your best advice to somebody wanting to get published? And I'm like, read. I know it sounds simple and stupid, but you learn so much from reading, other people's work, what works, how they did that. I'm not talking about plagiarizing. I'm just talking, just sort of, you kind of like absorb it through osmosis almost about how a book puts together, is put together, the structure, the conventions, all those sort of things are really important. And then, you go to conferences where there's these workshops that amazing authors talk to you about, different topics and that sort of thing. And I highly recommend anybody who's, writing a book to join an organization of whatever, genre you're writing in, and to go to those kind of events if you can, because A, it's amazing what you can learn, and B, networking is everything. So you meet your kind of, you meet your people at those events that eventually, it's a very strange, weird thing to be a writer where you exist in your head a lot of the time. And it's really only other writers that can really understand, when you talk about the people talking in your head can be, you either got to, there's a certain subsection of people who will understand that, very well. Others will just think you're weird.
Mhm. Well, and is that really how the characters come to you? I mean, do you hear them talking to you? Is it a movie constantly running in your head and it's just, hey, I'm just recording this? Or is it some other just nebulous story idea?
Yeah, I think I guess I do sort of see them a bit as movies in my head, uh, and then you're recording it. But I think ideas for books come in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's you've seen something on the TV, or you've read something, or you've been eavesdropping on a conversation, which I've done more than once. I've literally followed two women around a grocery shopping one time, around the aisles after I'd finished. My shopping trolley was full because they were talking about this affair someone was having at work, or this, kind of just to each other. But I'm like, oh, I have to hear out this end. So I kind of followed them all the way around. So um, inspiration and ideas for books come from everywhere. I think you just have to be kind of open to it as well, or ask those two kind of questions, what if? All right, so that's an interesting concept, but what if we flip that around? Or what if this thing happened or that thing happened? Sometimes I start, even just like a title can, trigger a story. Sometimes a whole scene will come to me. Sometimes just one character will come to me, and then I have to go, okay, well, who are you and what's your story? Again, I know it sounds very weird, but that's the way it works up there.
Well, and the other thing with a lot of your series that I'm familiar with, I mean, you bounce around where some of them are set in Australia. So, great series with the rugby team, right?
Yes.
Which, hey, okay. But then you also have series set here in the States with the
Yes.
Credence Colorado books. I used to call those the cowboy books based on their covers. You have new covers. I can't call them that anymore.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But then you've
Yes.
got the medical ones and some other small towns and the rom-coms. I mean, you have such a variety of different novels. Again, with the inspiration, are you purposefully targeting certain subgenres with that? Or is it what the mood is or what the contract is calling for? How do you determine this? Is it an Australian book? Is it a US? Does it even matter?
Yeah, it depends. It does depend very much on whether that's an idea up front with myself. You can sort of just know whether it's, where it's set innately. The rugby books, for example, my Entangled editor came to me and said, "We want a rugby series. Do you want to write it?" And I was like, I don't like any kind of football at all. But I was like, sure, why not? Because anybody who reads, sports romance for the actual sport, I feel like they're reading it for the wrong reason. So I figured that, I knew enough that I could sprinkle it around. So that obviously loaned itself to being set in Australia because, obviously rugby's not very big in the US. It is in the UK. I could have said it there, but to me, this whole team had to be the Australian rugby team. So that was easy. Again, with the Credence series, my editor sort of said to me again, uh, do you want to write? I've got an idea for this sort of series. And I said it in Colorado. Credence is obviously a fictitious place because I was in the US at the Romance Writers of America conference in Denver. And I wanted to I didn't, so if, obviously I think a lot of people who've set books in Colorado set them in the snowy, in the Rocky Mountains where it's all beautiful and pretty and, touristy. And I wanted Credence to be this like sort of town that was like on the edge and the complete opposite of what you sort of think about, or what I think about anyway as an Australian about, Colorado. I wanted it to be flat and be really kind of, the town be quite, um, down and out, like, sort of, falling apart. Lots of people have left, sort of, and for that, so I wanted to go like the furthest point away that I could from the Rocky Mountains. And I had somebody drive me right out far eastern Colorado, like almost to Kansas sort of thing, so I could get a real feel for the territory, for sort of the land, the landscape, what the little towns look like out there. So yeah, that was why that was set in America. It very much depends. Like, I've written a lot of my Harlequin category romance novels. The medicals are set in Australia because Australia is a very popular setting for, for the readers. And also because I lived in the UK for a couple of years, I actually feel much more comfortable writing books set in the UK than I feel writing books in the US, because whilst I've been to the US a few times, being there and living there are two very different things. Like, I feel like I can write much more confidently set in the UK than I can write in the US. And there's been lots of interesting conversations between editors back and forth when I write something that I think is American and they're like, what is that? I remember once I wrote a line about the character being on the bones of their ass, as we would say here in Australia. And my editor was like, never heard that expression ever before. I was like, oh, that must be an Australian expression then. So those things can get kind of quite confusing, which is why it's great to have, if you're setting things in America, I mostly write American stuff for my American publishers. Well, there's obviously, it goes through several reads from different editors, that are American, who can go, oh, hang on, that's not right, which helps.
Well, and also one of your Australian series, I mean, it's the Outback Heat. And
Yes.
I know that these are books that you wrote originally back in 2015 for their original release, and they were ebooks. And now, of course, they're being re-released as another package, and they're actually in print. What's
Uh-huh.
that been like for you, going from the ebook from several years ago to now actually being able to hold these books for a wider audience?
Oh, so lovely. For years, there's been like a gap in my bookshelf where, they were never there because they only existed as an ebook. And when I floated the idea, they published through Tully Publishing. When I floated the idea with those guys there, saying, is it possible to get like a POD, version of these books, so can have print copies, people can buy, people often ask for them in print, and I go to book signings, it'd be nice to have them. At the same time, we did a repackage, we rebranded, we put on new covers, which I adore. And I also said, is it possible that we can maybe box them up digitally so people can either buy them individually or they can buy them as one sort of box set? So it's only been the last few months I've gone through this entire transition. The new covers are wonderful. I've got the books, I can hold them in my hand. I should actually, I should grab a book. Like, to be able to hold them in my hand has just been, you're right, after all these years, I didn't expect it, when suddenly I've been able to do it again. It's just been wonderful. Hang on, I'll just grab one. See, I'll grab four. So it's just so nice to be able to like hold them in my hand, sniff them. Like, the covers are so beautiful, and I love this series, so much. So it's very satisfying. So everybody go buy a print copy. They're beautiful.
Well, and along with those books, I also want to talk about Breaking All the Rules. You won awards for this, and it's so much fun. And because I'd read it when it came out, and I just did an audio listening to it and finished it up earlier today.
Mm.
And I mean, it just has all the different types of feels in there too. I mean, I'm laughing at the very beginning of it with, be out on the street, and then gasping at certain sections, and just cringing as you know what's coming with her in Austin, and I'm just like, ugh. Um, but I mean, it was such a success last year with that. I mean, how has that journey been, and all of the accolades for this book?
Yeah, breaking all the rules, because not many people know, because the cover is so different to the first three books. It's actually, is in that Credence world as well. And breaking all the rules has was a very convoluted, uh, sort of the way it actually ended up coming out on shelf, because it was supposed to come out 2 years prior to when it did come out, because of the pandemic and everything. It just kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. So it was very much a bit of an anticlimax, for me, in a way, when it came out, because it was like almost a bit like giving birth. Oh, finally, it's actually out there now, after having written it like 3 years beforehand. But it was wonderful, to see, to knowing that readers are reading it and saying this is a great book, and it winning awards, has really been amazing. And also, it's can be hard as a writer, like being quite isolated away in your own little world, to know how it's going to be. Kind of, are people going to like it? It's like, sending a baby out into the world, and people saying it's ugly when they don't like it. It can be very, it can be kind of fraught when that happens. So it was nice to see that people really enjoyed it, particularly, American audiences, because, I am not American. So being able to write it authentically enough that, the US readers were like, oh yeah, this is, I love this small town. I wish I lived there. I think B and Austin are great characters. To know that I got all that right, enough that people love the book. that was just, so satisfying. Yeah.
And also, I mean, with an older heroine too. I think
Yes.
I'm where
Yeah.
I'm appreciating those older characters. This one has the age gap, and there's just so much in the book where there's things that are totally outrageous yet still so relatable.
Yeah, she's pretty out there. She's pretty on the edge when she arrives in that small town. When she's just kind of done. She's sort of done with all the rules and all the strictures, and sort of does everything, breaks every sort of societal rule, kind of where women are concerned. She is a little bit out there, that's for sure. But I think also I like to write, and I think I do write funny, but I can also write emotional. And even now, if I write, there's bits in that book that as I was writing it made me cry. And, I can read it now, it can make me cry as well. To have that kind of interweaving of the complex relationship that Bea had with her mother and her father, also kind of brought that, gave it that sort of emotional, the deeper emotional um, kind of thing that kind of hooks you in when you're reading. You don't even know, but something's gone on behind the scenes and makes you more invested in the characters. I think it makes you want them to have their happily ever after, or their happiness as well. Yeah, I love Bea. I love Austen. Actually, Austen appears in the Sydney Smoke series. Anybody who's eagle-eyed enough to spot that. So I did a crossover book between Credence and the Sydney Smoke. So I had a US rugby import that came in book 8. So that's Playing It Tough. That's Ronan's story, and he's American import in Australia. But in I won't be able to remember the name of the book now, but one of the Smoke characters that's has not been in the series so far actually ends up in Credence recovering from an injury, and so they have their story, and in that story Austen first appears. So and then then he gets his story of breaking all the rules. So there's this kind of lovely crossover there that not many people are aware of. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go back and reread that
you
series now.
will see that
Yes,
Easter egg.
yeah.
Yeah.
What what uh which of the rules that Bea broke in this book caused you the most giggles as you were putting that in?
uh oh, I think I think maybe the skinny dipping, maybe. Because I don't know, the fact that they get they get caught by Arlo. That was I mean, obviously there's a kind of a sex scene that hangs off that as well. So that was, but the fact that they get sort of caught in the middle of it all by the town, copper, as we'd say in Australia. Um, I mean, it's also something I'd probably never ever. I'm such a rules follower. Like don't think I would ever like publicly skinny dip in any kind of body of water. And yeah, to have it sort of, yeah, have Austen at the end, uh, Arlo at the end come in and sort of catch them. That made me giggle a lot. And it's interesting because I hadn't, when I set out to write that scene, I hadn't planned for that at all. For them to be, caught, both of them in flagrante. Um, but that's the beauty of writing, I think. You start writing the scene and then suddenly you're like, suddenly there's Arlo and they're being caught. And so that's a convoluted beauty of a writer's mind. I think that's, you start off with one thing and then suddenly this whole scene opens up and you didn't even know it was going to happen.
Well, let's switch over and get some of our fresh fiction facts in. These are some rapid fire questions off the top of your head. Okay.
Okay.
Who would you most want to be stuck in an elevator with?
Um, Mark Ruffalo.
Ooh, like that one. Okay, other than books, because that's a gimme for authors, What is something that you own a ridiculous amount of?
Oh, sea glass. I'm a massive beachcomber, and I've developed an obsession with collecting sea glass. And it takes to hear my husband about it. He's like, sea glass. So I have a lot of sea glass. Yes.
What is something that can immediately take you out of a story?
Uh, Bad motivation, like illogical motivation. When something happens in a book, and then this happens, and a character goes woo way over here and acts completely out of character. That really pulls me out of a book. Yeah.
What luxury item can you not live without?
Oh, what luxury item can I not live without? I don't know. I don't think I have that many luxury items. Oh, look, we just got a RoboVac, those little
Yeah.
roving, and it's pretty good, I have to say. I mean, it's kind of dumb. Like, I'm thinking we must have got a cheap ass version of it, but it's still my little precious that I feel like I'm a little like just a little child. I sort of say, come on, Colin, come on out. There's the kitchen. So yeah, that is a bit of a luxury item, and I do love it.
What's the craziest thing that you've bought online?
What's the craziest thing I've bought online? Hmm. I hmm. I I need to check because I actually got a picture. Oh, I didn't buy it online. Okay, this thing. I did check it out online. And now, of course, I constantly get Amazon ads for it. But I was
Right. Yeah.
writing a book where the heroine turns up at the hero's house with like a hamster in a cage, that's clearly got some kind of gland problem going on because it's very, very fat. And she buys it this fancy wheel that's got all the bells and whistles, got lights when it goes around. And so I didn't buy that, but I went looking to see, what was available. And now I constantly get bombarded by ads from Amazon for hamster wheels. So I want to say I'm not buying a hamster wheel, but that's amusing. I don't buy a lot of stuff online. I really probably unusual like that. Um, I don't know. I think in Australia we're kind of a bit behind the Amazon kind of thing anyway. But I'm not a huge online buyer of things other than that. What I absolutely like. The last thing I bought was an iPhone for my father yesterday, so not very exciting.
Okay, you've been kidnapped, but they've returned
oh,
you 2 hours later because you will not stop talking about what?
oh, sea glass. I tell you, I'm obsessed with it. Yeah, totally.
Would you rather go back in time to meet your ancestors or travel into the future to meet your descendants?
Oof. Hmm. Oh, that's a tough one. That's a bit of maybe I've never really been particularly interested. I know lots of people would go to ancestry.com and look up their past and know, 1,500 years in the past what they were doing. I've never been particularly interested in that. So maybe fast forward to the future and meet future generations, because obviously, at some point I won't get to see them. So yeah, okay, let's go with that one.
Okay, all right, that works. What is your most dog-eared or reread copy of a book?
Okay, well, I have an admission. I don't generally tend to reread books at all. I'm not a rereader. Probably the author I've reread the most, and that's saying a lot because, again, I literally don't reread books, is Jennifer Cruzy. I've reread a few of her books. But in that, I probably listen to audio as well as and there's a scene in Agnes and the Hitman that she wrote with Bob Mayer that I really love. That's a great, it's probably a bit of a hinky thing to admit. It's a really great bad sex scene, like a sex scene that's like hilariously works out okay in the end, but everything goes wrong. And I feel like it's a really as a writer, it's a really great study in how to do that kind of thing. So I often reread that bit, which makes me sound like super creepy. But probably the book I've read the most over the years, and I just literally bought a new copy of it because it had a beautiful, lovely new cover and like, shiny stuff, is Charlotte's Web. I adore Charlotte's Web. I read it to my children. I read it several times myself. I cry every single time at the end, even when I was reading it to my children who are most weirded out by me, saying, oh, but just because they're friends and all, like sobbing away. So yes, probably Charlotte's Web is the answer to that question, which is, not remotely related to romance or anything, but yeah.
No, no, that's okay. It doesn't have to be a romance book. I
Mhm.
mean, there's a lot of older classic books that and I love that it's almost a childhood book, right?
Yes.
So many different feelings that are then packed into that.
Yeah, it's a kid's book, but it's so readable as an adult. It's so relevant, it's readable, it totally works. Like I say, as an adult, I've probably read it a dozen times. And that's, for me, that's a lot.
Is there an author who you consider to be one of your must-read authors that you have to read all of their work, everything in their backlist, and as soon as it comes out?
Yeah, Jennifer Cruzy is definitely that author for me, definitely. Um, I remember the very first ever Jennifer Cruzy that I read, it was called Getting Rid of Bradley. This would have been back like in the early 90s, probably. And prior to that, I'd only really ever read romance-wise. I was a huge Harlequin Mills and Boone reader, so I'd read a lot of like the kind of presents books where it's like lots of like doctors, and I'm sorry, boss secretaries, sort of that. I always read at the sort of steamier end of the spectrum, but I read a lot of English or Australian settings. And I read Getting Rid of Bradley, and it literally like blew my mind. I had like light bulbs going off everywhere. I was like, oh my God, romance can be like this. It can be snarky and funny, and I was like, I want to write like that. That's what I want to write like. So for me, it was a real light bulb book. And then I've just read everything she's ever written. I'd read her shopping list. I mean, I she's writing again now. Thank goodness she's doing more works with Bob May, and I've read all her recent ones as well. But she had a long time where she, didn't write at all, and I was like, please write more. I was one of those sort of, readers are like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? Come on, write. I didn't ever say that to her, but in my head. So yes, and I think Marion mentioned Sarah Maybury earlier, and she's one of my favorite authors as well. She's an Australian author. I love her. Oh, again, we'll read all of her books, anything she puts out. And there's another Australian author called Eve Dangerfield, who is a Melbourne author who writes great, funny, sexy books that often have a bit of kink in them. I'll read anything that she puts out as well.
Well, and to kind of tack onto your answer there, please, 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 what are you writing now? What can we expect from you next?
Ah, right. Yes. What am I writing now? I've actually just started yesterday a new medical. So I've got the next 3 years I'm writing a medical for each year. It's part of a trilogy with a presents author Claire Connolly, myself, and another medical author JC Haraway. So, and it's set on a fictitious Mediterranean island. So I'm working on that. I've just finished we call them RUROs here, so rural romance, that HarperCollins has said they want to buy. So that's amazing. And I've just finished working on a backlist book of mine, Holding Out for a Hero, that's actually being re-released by another publishing house as frontlist, and I'm converting it from Australia to an American setting. So that's taken me that's a lot of work. So I've just finished sort of doing that, which has been it took me 5 weeks to do it. It was like way bigger job than I thought it would be. Mm.
Man, you just dropped that bombshell here at the end of the interview. I have so many questions about that process. Wow. But for me, those are going to have to wait. But for our readers and listeners, what is the best way for them to keep up with you, find out what's going on, and maybe send those questions that I'm having about that conversion process to you in maybe as a side chat?
Yes. So I think probably the best way to keep up with all my news, new releases, sales, discounts, that kind of thing, is through my newsletter. So if you go to my website, www.amyandrews.com.au, there's a link to you can click and to join my newsletter, and you also get a free novella set in the Credence series. So in the Credence world. So if you join my newsletter, you get that as well. That's the best way. I send out. I don't send out. I send out one, definitely one a month, sometimes two a month. So I'm not bombarding your inbox every 3 days with a newsletter. That's the best way to do it. But I'm also across all social media. I'm on Instagram as Amy Andrews Books. I'm on TikTok as Amy Andrews Books. I'm on Facebook as Amy Andrews Books. I am all over the interwebs as well.
Awesome. Well, Amy, thanks so much for joining us today. But stick around for the happy hour with our readers. And readers and listeners, they definitely need to check out your books because I thoroughly enjoy them. And there's so many different subgenres and series that people can check out. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I loved it. Thank you. Thank you. Mwah.